Hello and welcome to another episode of Yemmy Reviews, where I review things. Today, it's a book. But before we get into that, shout out to Chronoside, who is a Let's Player and live streamer who plays a multitude of different games, everything ranging from Outlast to Mario Kart 8. He's also done a lot of work in the YouTube community here. He's started his own little Discord server, not little anymore, but it's pretty big now, where YouTubers can get together, share their content, and interact with each other. And it's a really nice environment, and he's done a really good job at managing everything that's been going on. So big shout out to him. If you want to, you can check out his channel down below. Link will be there in the description. Hey, that's it for that. Let's get on with the review of Game Over, which is edited together by Johnathan Green. Now, when I saw this book on the shelf of the closing bookstore for 75% off the asking price, I didn't even flinch to pick it up. Game Over labeled across the front was enough to get me to look at it, let alone buy it, with a multitude of horror stories based on old video games that I loved when I was a kid. Frogger, Mario, Tetris, you name it, they were on there. If only it had Metal Slug, it would be everything I ever knew when I was a kid. Game Over, edited together by Johnathan Green, is a sort of a letdown. There are 12 short stories, each one dealing with different game or a different subject, and each one varies in length and are about 13 pages front and back. I sit my Cool Cat t-shirt and I wonder where my life went wrong. And then I remember that I bought this t-shirt after I finished reading this book, and it all makes sense. Some of the stories are interesting, but not many end as well as they start. In this review, I'm gonna quickly as I can go over each story and give them a unique score out of 5. Then I'll rate the collection as a whole, if I make it. I know this is something different than usual, but I have been reading a lot more, and I felt the need to include some of the literature on my channel. Please sit back and enjoy. The first horror story is called The Russian Effect, written by James Wallace. It follows the main character named Kevin, who lives in the UK back in the time when floppy disks held the key to infinite possibilities. His hacker friend named Mick gives him a floppy with a game entirely made in Russia. It was a sort of Tetris knockoff, but you could upgrade yourself by adding new blocks, new colors, and most importantly, a 360 view of the tower you were trying to beat. Most of the book takes place in the world of the Russian game, which starts to spill out into the real life of Kevin. After rearranging his room in the Tetris towers and feeling uneasy about the natural world, he tracks down the son of the creator of the game to try and give it back. What ensues is a shouting match between Kevin and he kind of runs away, and of course, he runs into his demise. He gets stabbed by a Russian agent while getting off of a bus. That's not what's killed him though. Somehow he's able to open and enter the world of the Russian Tetris game, and that's where he finds the Russian kid's dad, who pulls him in and they vanish without a trace. A lot of books in this collection end this way, and they're interesting, but up until the very end, they just kind of drop off. This one wasn't so much horror, but it was kind of interesting. I'd probably give this one a 3 out of 5. The next story was rather boring, named Personal Growth by Sarah Peploe. It follows a man named Sam who goes out of control trying to clean mold off the wall. This one doesn't even follow an old video game, and it's just full of stupid filler until the end when the mold overcomes his body and turns him into a fine human specimen who must, and I quote, go out and touch people. Obviously it's to spread the mold. This one's dumb, and it has no payoff. There is little horror, and really the whole thing is just stunk of piss poor writing. I give this one a 1 out of 5. After that despicable show of writing, we are introduced to Stephen in the story Control by Jonathan Oliver. This is another one of those interesting until the end kind of stories. It follows the son of a mortician. Both his parents own the funeral home, and he is in line to inherit if he desires. Let me redo that. It follows the son of a mortician. Both the parents own the funeral home, and he is in line to inherit the funeral home if he desires. A lot of the book centers around his father's death and how he was trying to play a game to beat it in order to save his life, because in the past he had played a game and beat the high score and gotten what he wanted soon after, whether it was a track race or an eating competition, I think. I don't even remember. The game ends up crashing and his father dies. Soon after, his mother dies as well. Steven doesn't want the funeral home, so he invests in some up-and-coming tech, which makes him very wealthy. He then buys the old arcade game years later that he played to try and save his dad's life. Of course, this time he beats it, and the game continues to function after the end screen. And what do you know? His dad's face appears on the screen! Once again, there's no payoff to this story, and it ends right there with no explanation and nothing. Luckily, this story was interesting enough, so I gave it a 3 out of 5. So, this next one is a bit odd, but is probably one of my favorite stories. It's called The Face of the Deep, written by Simon Bestwick, and it has a general vibe of Frogger. So, there are super intelligent frogs created by a scientist who has also created super intelligent salamanders, who has also helped create a multitude of animal cyborg hybrids that can be controlled by the army. The army isn't satisfied with the frogs because they can't see them in a wartime setting, so he releases them to free them, and the only way out of the area is to cross is across 6 lanes of traffic and a river. Ring any bells? Moses is the name of the main frog, and he leads the other hyper-intelligent frogs on an adventure much like Frogger. It is much more gritty than I thought it would be, and it was very well done. I didn't care for the mixed-up plot. I don't see why some writers have to write scenes that are in the past and then they mix it with current events. It just kind of muddies it up, but all in all, it was a good one. The payoff is that Moses finds an underwater megacity of hyper-intelligent salamanders who rise up and prepare for war against humans. 4.5 out of 5 on this one. Okay. So this one is loosely based on Mario, or technically Donkey Kong, and it's called It Was Beauty, and it was written by Gav Thorpe. This one is a bit interesting, I guess, but it lost me at the end, as most of them do. A gorilla whose name I will not try to pronounce is able to do advanced sign language and all that stuff with the help of cybernetics. In comes Marianne, not Mario, Marianne, who is sleeping with Pauline, yes, Pauline, who developed the cybernetics for the gorilla. She's working for the government and is making great progress, but one day the gorilla suddenly attacks and takes Pauline into the building and kills the army commander in charge of the project. I'm skipping a lot because the story was really dumb, but essentially Pauline was controlling the gorilla, and Marianne kills her with a hammer. So, 1 out of 5. The next one is called Screenburn by James Swallow. This one is actually pretty neat. It tells the tale of a journalist who was writing a piece on a recently deceased game developer who had 2 years of his life erased at the same time a strange arcade cabinet came out called Polybus, which was killing children who played it. In his investigation, he finds out that the game developer was being used by the military to try and create a game to combat Russia. Fast forward into the future, and the journalist essentially gives a terrorist the code to create the new version of the game for iPhones. After the terrorist, busts into the journalist's car and takes the evidence, he releases a big app during an Apple convention, and people start dying because they played the game and they go crazy. The journalist is captured and forced to play the game, but before he kills himself, he kills the terrorist, and he stops the game from ever being played again by smashing his car into a Best Buy and using one of those test laptops to run a program that erases things on the internet somehow. Then the cops showed up in the bookends. No real end to this one, which is a shame, but I'll give it a 4 out of 5. The Animal Inside by Laurel Sills is one of the worst pieces of literature I've ever read. At least the mold one was competent, but this one is just... holy shit, it drained me. It is one of the shortest in the book, but it drags on for so long. It introduces characters left and right and describes events that don't relate to anything, only to find out that this woman and her 2 male friends, I'll say, for the sake of time, can transform into animals. She turns into a snake and kills them both on a beach where the book began! Woo! That's artsy! This was so stupid I almost died. R.I.P. Yemmy, 1 out of 5. Welcome to the Pleasure Dome by Alexandria Peel makes no sense whatsoever. So a person named Williams sees a job offer as a security guard at an old arcade that was built inside a church. There's this Japanese game there that's making kids kill themselves by either jumping off the building or running into the streets. The story goes that the game is possessed, and the last security guard went crazy after he heard voices, and so he quit. Our main character investigates the arcade after the third death he witnesses and finds an old sanctuary which is filled with the enemies from the game. What happens next doesn't matter, but just know that he ends up playing the game and then the book ends before anything exciting happens. 2 out of 5. The next story, which is based on Bomberman, is called Lines of Fire, and it's by Tim Major. It follows a kid named Matt who goes over to his friend's house to play video games. His friend lives there in a gated community, and he finds out that no one lives there except for Patrick, who's his friend, and his friend's father. So Matt finds out that Patrick is crazy, and he only has one game, an old arcade game which is very similar to Bomberman. Patrick pulls out a knife and forces Matt to play until he can get away. He falls into a pool, and Matt finds Patrick's younger brother in ghost form, who uses a furnace to incinerate his brother a la Bomberman style. The end of the book finally has a good payoff, with Matt opening the furnace to reveal a child's bones, which is obviously Patrick's younger brother. This one was the most nerve-wracking out of all of them, but it still wasn't really that great. The end was just kind of like, okay, I get it. And I'd say, it was okay at best. It was definitely the most horror out of all of them. I give it a 3 out of 5. To Those Left Behind by Ad Chillman is a shitty story based on some game called Paperboy. It is stupid and shouldn't be read by anyone. I will spare you from reading it and tell you that a detective is looking into murders of several people who are killed with paper, and it turns out that a monster from hell is killing anyone who comes in contact with an old book written by some kid. The detective dies in the end because he has the book accidentally, but he tells whoever finds it next to destroy it. It's dumb. It's not scary, it's dumb, and it's really, really fucking dumb. 1 out of 5. The Lord of Unswept Places by George Pickett is stupid and dumb and is not worth your time reading. It chronicles a lawyer's secretary who has to go listen to the ramblings of an inmate who is charged with murdering 2 people. Short story, even shorter. Her friend killed one person after putting on a mask, and she rips her heart out, and then the inmate kills her friend after putting on a mask and cutting her friend's head off. Then, after they both are dead, they come back to life to wreak havoc. Oh my. 2 out of 5 on this one. Finally, we are here at the final story called Last Life by Michael Carroll. This one is kind of interesting but turns dumb really fast. Nikki, the main character, tells in a strange way with the same past the future writing like It Was Beauty and the Frogger one about how all his friends used to go to an arcade every day and play Frogger. He ran really, really fast and blah blah blah, the details don't matter. Each of his childhood friends die in some bizarre way, which is told in this really horrible fashion where it skips from past to present over and over and over again, which really, really muddles the story. And I know I've kind of said this before, but it's true, it just doesn't work for this type of story in my opinion. So, he's the last kid left, and it's revealed that he left a gate open to a dog who was vicious, and he did it on purpose, and it killed a little girl and disfigured another one who eventually kills herself. The ghost of the girl who kills herself then haunts the boys until they die, and in the end, boom, Nick gets hit by a truck after crossing a freeway on foot and talking with her ghost. It was really and not that interesting, to be honest. 2 out of 5. So, that's it. That's all the fantastic stories. Sarcasm, of course. In this collection of short stories, I cannot call this a horror story collection because literally one story made me feel, I guess, horrified, maybe more uneasy, But a lot of these stories were just dumb or too bizarre, and even the ones that were interesting ended with no real explanation, no real kicker like most horror stories do. Ending your story with some artsy-fartsy line or a sudden event doesn't make the story satisfying in the end, nor does it make the story any better by doing this. I can't recommend this book, but I will put the good ones and the bad ones in columns above if you want to check them out specifically. Overall, this collection of short stories is lame and a waste of time, and there's too much filler in these books, which was the death of them. Most of them were strange or dumb and had bad endings, and I don't even know. If I had to give this book a score out of 5, overall the book definitely gets like a 1.8 out of 5. Yep, I actually did buy this shirt, just so you know.